All right, everybody, really quick. I just want to go over the note on the evidences of evolution today. So again, make sure you open the note. Keep in mind the end of the month is coming. We're also gonna have a notebook check. So make sure you save all these notes, annotate them. Okay. So we left off talking about natural selection, right? We said that nature select who or which living thing gonna survive, right? It's kind of like, remember the pepper moth, right? Nature change, so the one that fit the best will survive. Today we're gonna talk about evolution, right? And we said that over time. Let's go to the note really quick. Um, so quick. So, so today we're gonna have a note. It's on evidence of evolution, right? Just a quick review. We talk about natural selection, right? Nature picked those that fit to survive, and that one, when they move to a different environment, they might not fit in that environment, and they will not survive. So they survive one environment does not mean they will survive in the next environment. They have to struggle to fit in. Okay. And we said that this whole idea came from this guy, Charles Darwin, right? So just a quick history. I think you might have studied Charles Darwin in middle school. So Charles Darwin is a evolutionist. So he studied evolution, right? He jumped on a ship in England, and he kind of traveled around the world. The place that he spent a lot of time is the Galapagos Island right here. This island right here. This is where he collect all the data. It's in 1831, right? And then he put all these data together, and he came up with a theory. It started out as a hypothesis first, right? And then over time, there are more research, more data to make it to a theory. And his theory is that all living creature has evolved or gradually changed over time. And that's what he called evolution, right? So before we move on to evolution, I understand that some people might say, oh, my religion don't let me believe in evolution. We're, again, just like global climate change. We're not asking you to believe anything. We're asking you to study it, to learn it, right? It's like a good lawyer. You have to know both sides of the story. And then if you believe or not, it's up to you, okay? But again, in science, it's all about data, right? We don't believe in things because of this and that, right? We study because based on the data. So he came up with a theory of evolution, right? So how do we know that? So his theory of evolution by natural selection. That means over time, nature changed, the earth changed, the environment changed. So living things start to change as well to fit in. That's why we have different species, right? Speciation. So what are some of the evidences that they have? So there are four that we're going to focus on today. One is what we call anatomical evidence. The other one is what we call embryology. And then molecular biology, which is like genetics, DNA, RNA, protein. And then, of course, the oldest evidence would be what we call fossil, right? Using fossil to study. So the first thing is what we call anatomical evidence, right? So what are different type of anatomical evidence that he used to support the theory of evolution, or a lot of evolutionists nowadays use it to support? The first thing is what we call homologous structure. What is a homologous structure? It technically means same structure, but different function, right? Example, human arm, cat arm, whale, fin, bat, wings. They all have the same bone structure, right? Now we can highlight it here for you. Same bone structure, same bone structure. But then, of course, they are used for different function. This, in case, does suggest common ancestor. That means they evolved from the same ancestor. So it does suggest, right? Because they have the same structure, but over time, since they have to fit into the environment, they learn to use differently. For example, just imagine this. You and your brother or siblings have the same feature in your family, but over time, you grow up to do different things because you're in different environment. So it's kind of like that. So homologous does suggest common ancestor, okay? And the second type of anatomical evidence that they use to talk about evolution is what we call analogous structure. Analogous structure, on the other hand, is the opposite. It means different structure, but have the same function. It does not suggest common ancestor, does not, okay? So this one is the opposite. Unlike homologous structure, it does suggest same ancestor. Analogous structure do not. For example, a bat wing and a bird wing are the same bone structure, homologous. But when you compare them to insect wing, even though they have the same function, jobs, but they don't have the same structure. So they are not from the same ancestor, and then we call that analogous structure, right? So if somebody asks you, is a bird comparing the insect, are they very close in ancestor? The answer is no, right? Because they have analogous structure, different bone structure. But even though they do the same function, it's kind of like this. One day you decide to become a teacher, and then you work with other teachers, even though you have the same job function. Does that mean you guys come from the same family? No, right? So that's what analogous structure is. And the third type of structure that also suggests evolution is what we call vestigial structure. Vestigial structure, any structure that you no longer use and minimize, become smaller. It does not disappear. It lose function. It lose a job, becomes smaller. Just imagine somebody who break their arm, right? They have to wear a cast. If they wear it for a whole year without using their arm, and when they open it, they would notice that one arm will be smaller because they don't use it anymore. They minimize the function. There are many structure and vestigial structure that can be used to suggest common in ancestry. For example, human, we have coccyx or tailbone. We don't have tail, we know that. But we do have remnant, these bone that remind us of tail. And that kind of like support the theory of evolution where human might have evolved from other primates, monkeys, right? Because we used to have tail according to evolution and vestigial structure. Or if you look at another vestigial structure would be a pelvic bone, right? X-ray. Pelvic bone suggests that they might have hind leg or back leg. So that's where it come into the theory of evolution that whale might have evolved from land. They come from land and they go down the ocean to hunt. Over time, they find so much food in the ocean, they decide to stay in the ocean. So they don't disappear, but that pelvic bone becomes smaller because they don't need to use their feet anymore, right? And then there's other vestigial structure that you might find human appendix, right? Appendicitis, or appendectomy. Let me remove appendix right here. This little small intestine that might have some function, but we no longer need it, so they there for now. When they infect, it can be very painful. They have to be removed, but we don't need it. And then in the cornea eye, what we call a nictitating membrane, right? It's a remnant we don't need anymore, but it might suggest that maybe we evolved with other lizard and stuff where they have a membrane that cover their eye because they cannot blink, but we do blink. So maybe we no longer need it. So that's the three type of anatomical structure that support or do not support the theory of evolution, right? And the next thing I want to move on so we can make it short is embryology. You can also use embryo or unborn fetus, unborn baby type of thing, not fetus, right? So after the sperm and egg come together, the first thing it become is a zygote. And after a zygote would be what we call a embryo, and then become a fetus. So we can look at different animal. You can see that the early stage of their embryo are very similar, right? If I don't tell you this is a human, you don't think this is a human. But as they develop, they grow different and more different and different. So this does suggest the theory of evolution because things start in the beginning similar and slowly they evolve because to fit into the environment. And that's what embryology do. And then you also have amino acid sequence, looking at DNA, how similar we are compared to other organism, or protein sequence to determine if how related we are to them. For example, one type of protein is what we call cytochrome C. And this protein is used to identify how close human and chimpanzee, for example. And in human chimpanzee, we are technically, I believe, 98% or something similar to them. But in this protein, we are identical to them. So that means we are very, very close to the chimpanzee, according to the theory of evolution, right? So we look at this and we can see that how close we are relate to them, right? For example, to chimpanzee, we have 0 difference. Rattlesnake, 12, 24, and dog, right? So if I ask you, can you show me the evolution, how closely we related to these organisms, then you can say that we are most related to chimpanzee, second to the dog, and then the rattlesnake and the dogfish shark, right? And then we can use this information to put in what we call a cladogram, a branching tree, like a family tree, right? But in this case, it show you how different species or different family of organism are related to each other. For example, if I ask you this cladogram, I ask you, human are most related to who? You say chimpanzee. And then second to gorilla, orangutan, and gibbon, right? Or you can have a cladogram that show you different types, different type of species of organism. Doesn't have to be only primates, right? And you can see, right, the closely they are, I mean they branch very close. The farther the branch are, I mean they far away from each other. And the last thing, of course, that everybody probably know that Charles Darwin used a lot is fossil, preserve remain of ancient organism, right? We learn in physical science you have different type of rocks, right? Especially sedimentary rocks where like layers over time it build up. So you have an animal that die, layer up, right? And you dig it up. You can kind of look at different layer, right? If those two organisms are kind of in the same layer, that means they might have evolved from each other, for example. Okay. All right. That keep it short. Make sure you do the summary, read the note, and do your vocab list. All right. And this is evidences of evolution, right? All right. Thank you. Bye bye.